Hi, welcome to Lissa Lissa podcast show. Today we have Chris Deschene. Hi, Chris. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
And Chris, today I would like to ask some questions. What is your current job?
First off, I want to again thank you for the opportunity, and I want to say hello to the nation. And I want to say, if you were my supporter, thank you for your support. The question regarding my job, I'm an attorney. So after I worked for the Department of Energy under the last administration, I went back into private practice. So I work with tribes all over the country on energy development projects. I'm based out of a couple of places. Our law firm is a national tribal law firm. I'm in the DC office. So as it is, most of the projects are in Indian country. So I travel all over the country working with tribes.
Thank you, Chris. How do you feel about the issues of your disqualification?
You're going right to it. Well, I can imagine most of you can share the same frustration that I have or had with the whole effort. On a good day, I would call it nonsense. Because of the terminologies and the resulting, I guess, let's just call it legal holding that the Supreme Court of the Navajo Nation issued, I think is fully biased, and it was incorrect given the progression of the whole legal effort. So to me, the frustration is, look, the system failed, the administrative and regulatory failed, the Navajo Nation bar failed in keeping the standards for the attorneys, and then I just think simple leadership failed in, for example, the folks that fought that battle. So bottom line, I was very disappointed with the way our legal system essentially failed because of the challenges that were brought at that time. I think with any kind of loss, folks have to go through a period of sadness and anger, and for me it was just a measure of frustration that if we want to help our nation, if we want to do what our elders are telling us to do, our young, and we're going out, we're learning about the world, we're getting educated, and we're working hard to bring those elements of the outside world to help our people be successful, and you're turned away for a number of reasons. In my case, because of that whole issue, let's just call it that, it's frustrating. It is, and the sad part about it is I don't think the full story is out there, and I don't think the full truth is out there. In fact, I'm looking to really write a book about it, and if we're lucky enough to do maybe a documentary on it. And I'm happy to bring both sides to the table to talk about this, because let's just put it, the one segment of the battle between old and new finally came to Navajo in 2014, and so there's a lot there. But overall, I know that people are strong, and I know the nation's strong, and we're going to get past it. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Chris. How would you feel if you did win the presidential race in 2014?
So first off, I would feel really good about it. I think that some of the things that are hard to understand is when, for me, the principles of leadership were very clear and evident. We said during our campaign, leaders don't lie, cheat, or steal. And 14, it was a serious reflection of that. The system, you can call it the Supreme Court, you can call it whoever, you can call it the challengers. That was a stolen opportunity. I think there are a lot of lies surrounding it, and the whole cheating is, the nation was cheated out of really a generation of young that we told, or that the message was, thank you, but we don't need you. And so it'll take another generation to bring them back into the fold. And my concern was, the reason why I ran is our nation's in trouble. So let's find ways to address that. And who better than your own selves to take the action to do that? So if we had won, there would have been challenges. Just because you win the presidency of the Navajo Nation, the problems don't go away. But we had some plans. We had identified leadership. We had identified a number of critical issues. And for me, it wasn't about, I don't need to pad my resume, if you will. I think I've done pretty good in my life, but it was, let's see if we can open doors for all our nation, and if it takes somebody like me to help knock it down, so that many of our people can be successful, that's what I was going to do. Plus, I was worried. I was really worried that our government and our nation was falling behind, and I do know that, and I see that at a national level. And I would have been proud because we would have been in a position to help make some good changes. And so that is a measure of grief and sadness that we just have to process. But there are good people. The health and welfare of the nation should not be contingent on one person. Rather, the movement itself should thrive. And so even though we did not win, what came out of it was Navajo Voters Coalition. What came out of it are these delegates who are working with the same principles, the same kind of vision and ideas for our nation. And hopefully that what I'm doing now is encouraging our nation to vote. That is how you protect the ideals that we fought for in 2014.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that's very true, and these generations these days now, our youth needs to open their eyes, and we see a lot of elders at these chapters. We need to see more of the youth out there, and they need to start voting because it's very, very important, and it's for their future. And the next question I have for you is, what would it have meant for women in leadership?
Essentially what it would have meant is that we have reached a time in history where there's parity, there's equality, and that women are fully qualified to be leaders, to be managers, to be, we now have in the world women who are leading combat troops in the battle. We have women who could have, this last presidential race, been a president of the United States. And here for us, the whole concept of Hojon talks about balance. And we shared, Fanny brings balance to the leadership of our campaign. And if we're talking about finding solutions, my mother's insight, my grandmother's insight, Fanny's insight, our staff, all of that would have been helpful in finding solutions. And for example, my wife is an attorney. She's fully qualified. She knows probably more than many folks how to work on recognition issues for other natives throughout the country. She knows how to handle housing issues. She's battling and fighting to help cities and towns and states with recover funding, and these are multi and hundreds of millions of dollars. So the technical, the expertise, the proficiencies out there are, to me, just another source of strength that would have complemented the work that we were doing as a whole.
Thank you, Chris. What does this rally tour mean to you, traveling with Chris and Friends tour?
This tour is about getting out the vote. This tour is about sharing with our voters, our people, the importance of voting. And what I'm learning is we're kind of doing it old school politics, which is rallies, and it works for a certain demographic of our people. Folks who are comfortable with going to a chapter meeting, who go to a rally in the old sense. What we're missing is, I would say, 75% of our voting electorate. Those are if I'm middle-aged, then that is what it is, the middle-aged kind of folks, and are young for sure. We need to be able to say that the strength and power of our nation is represented by the votes that are casted through all the age demographics from our people. The whole idea that the strength and numbers of our election and our votes matters is not fully recognized or materialized unless we vote. We need to vote, and so this tour is about finding strong, honest, visionary leaders, but also sharing with the electorate. There is a responsibility to vote, and nobody should take that away from you. And if you do not vote, nothing will change, I promise you, because the status quo wins. So this whole idea of I'm not involved, not interested, it's boring, those are all excuses, really a form of apathy. And I'll let your listeners look up that word, apathy, of saying it doesn't matter. And the bottom line is your votes matter. I would say, look, if the people chose their leadership, it would be reflected in the votes that were casted.
You are absolutely right about that. Whoever's listening to my podcast show today, please go out and vote. It's very important that all the young generation is the one that needs to vote out there.
You know, I heard of something from somebody talked about it, and this is one way for all our young listeners. We all have devices, phones that we have our music and our playlist, right? So that's a measure of like, hey, I get to choose what my playlist, I develop my playlist. But I don't think you would be comfortable if you let Masana or Che define your playlist. So in that same analogy, even though Masana and Che are voting, they are essentially determining what leaders represent you. So like the way you pick your music, you should be able to pick your leaders and say, I tend to like this style, or this kind of, this sounds good to me. You know, what sounds good to grandma and grandpa, Che or Nully, might not sound good to you, but you don't get a say if grandma and grandpa pick your playlist, and you have to listen to their music.
I agree with you. Any important issues you are addressing that face all Native Nation?
You know, we've been fighting for a long time, and the danger is if there is no balance. If one party or the other moves with policies, programs, philosophies, actions, legislation that is so skewed under their principles that it's out of harmony, that's a danger for us. So we have survived histories that included assimilation, elimination, takings. We have survived all these kind of efforts, and there is a real danger right now that we can't just retreat into our native lands and saying this is safe, this is our safe area, and the world doesn't get us. The world, I would submit that they first have a harder time understanding who we are. What they need to know is, look, we're actually the same. We vote just like any American. We pay taxes like any American. We cheer for the same teams as any American, and we have the same social, musical, societal, environmental goals as anybody. And guess what? We actually fall in love with other people other than our nation. So there is a mix, and the danger is when people start saying that we're different and separate us, and then do things like it's a real deal that's happening. Go look up what's happening to the Mashpee tribe in Massachusetts. Federal government just basically said, yep, we don't recognize their ability to have land in the trust. That's a danger precedent. And so those real world problems exist. There are people who don't want us to vote. They don't want, because you live on a reservation and P.O. boxes, they don't think you're qualified to vote. There's a lot of things happening in the real world, and to simply ignore it, or to simply say, hey, it's not my problem, I think you're really allowing a harder battle for us to overcome if we don't pay attention to some of these issues.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for being on my podcast show.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate it. I do hope that the bottom line, if you're listening, Go out and vote. You can find it online. You can find it on your phone. You can call any number of people. You can ask your mom, who you probably haven't talked to for a day, but ask her, your dad, your uncle, your Che, your Masana, your Nullies, anybody who votes, and say, look, I need help. Help me vote. And then when you do, don't go by yourself. Go with somebody. Go with your bros. Go with your friends. Go with somebody that makes voting fun, and you guys can say, yep, I did it. And I voted, and it matters, because it does. There's a lot of races that comes down to the wire, and just look at North Dakota. There's voter suppression happening out there because they want to suppress Native votes so they can change the outcome of a U.S. Senate race, which will then have other effects for the rest of the country. So it matters. Please go out and vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chris Deschene. Lissa Lissa podcast show.